Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. It's really nice to be here. My name's Diane Robinson, and I'm a 1994 Los Angeles Corps member. I taught in Compton for my 2 years, and then I kept teaching in Hawthorne, California. I'm currently the CEO of Public Square Partnership, and I'm going to share a little bit with you about the work we're doing at Public Square in Connecticut. And before I do that, actually, I wanted to find out a little bit about who all is in the room to help our panelists actually know who our audience is and myself. So raise your hand if you are a first or second year teacher. Awesome. Raise your hand if you are interested in teacher leadership. Okay. And raise your hand if you're someone who is responsible for developing the capacity of teacher leaders. Excellent. All right. So we're going to have a great discussion today. It's really exciting to be a part of this panel because I think I've gotten a chance to work with everybody on this panel at some point in my life professionally, which is now the past 20 years of doing this work. I became a teacher leader in Compton in 1995 because nobody else wanted to be the grade level chair in my school. So all of a sudden I was in this role and I didn't necessarily have all the skills and knowledge to lead other adults. Over the years, I've worked in the realm of human capital, so developing great teachers and actually principals, working on staff at Teach for America, and then working with KIPP actually, and having a chance to work with Susan to recruit some of her rock star teacher leaders to be principals. And now I'm working with an organization that I'm going to tell you a little bit about to help ground our discussion today. But just so you know where we're going, I'm going to share a bit about Public Square, and then we're going to turn it over to our panelists, who are each going to talk to you about the work that they're doing with their organizations in this area of developing teacher leaders. And then we have a set of questions, which really will be a discussion. And as you're listening to us, to the panelists and the discussion that we're having, I really hope you'll think of questions that you may have for them. We're going to leave some time for you to ask some questions, and then we're going to wrap up. All right, so really quickly on the work we're doing at Public Square. After 15 years of working to support great teachers and principals, and having a chance to step back for a few years at Harvard and be in the first cohort of the EDLB program, I've become slightly obsessed with system change, and I've also become even more convinced that for us to see more and more kids have access to that excellent education that we're all committed to realizing as the vision of Teach for America, I truly believe schools are the unit of change for this work. And so at Public Square, we're working to create world-class schools, right? Schools that are putting kids on track to college and career readiness, schools that are starting with what kids need first, and that are also truly supporting the educators so that they can deliver on these promises to kids. So our mission is to build a portfolio of organizations that are working with our schools to improve over time. Right, and the education landscape in Connecticut has changed a lot. I don't know if anyone knows about Connecticut, but we have persistently one of the largest achievement gaps in the country. We really actually have two Connecticut's. The Connecticut's that most people think about, Greenwich, Connecticut, and then you have Bridgeport, New Haven, Hartford, the communities that we serve, where kids are persistently grade levels behind. And so 10 years ago, I guess now, we opened Teach for America in Connecticut. I was really excited to be a part of that. And the landscape has changed dramatically. But what has happened is that oftentimes multiple organizations are working at a school and may not be working together, working in the same direction. So our organization actually is very involved in, sorry, I'm not sure where my clicker is. Ah, thank you. We practiced this and clearly. Okay, so just to give you an idea, for us, schools, again, are the unit of change. We're working with schools over time, right, to make sure every seat in that school becomes high quality. For us, you don't get there unless you've got great teachers and principals, right? So we fund organizations that work in partnerships with schools, districts and charter schools, and magnet schools. We're really agnostic, right? And because I think the educators here in the room will know whether you're in a charter or a district school, you still need great curriculum, standards, teaching and learning to be happening, and that's what we're focused on. So we've actually supported the work of New Leaders and the New Teacher Project in Connecticut, and I'm excited actually about the potential to get a few other partners here in our state. So one of our biggest strategies is human capital, and we started actually there because we're so far behind in Connecticut when you think about the support that exists for educators. We fund directly charters and operators that are running turnaround schools. And we're also equally important to building demand for great schools. I don't know if anyone here was at the panel earlier with Kaya Henderson, who was talking about the importance of doing this work with our communities. So every operator, every partner that we bring to Connecticut, we bring our community groups to them, and we have them engage with them so that they understand what New Leaders is going to be doing in the school that their kid goes to. And I'll move on just to give you an idea of some of the challenges we face in Connecticut. Right now we're supporting one district, and just to give you an idea, in this district, the majority of the teachers are either between year 1 and 5 of teaching, or they're above 14 years of teaching, right? So there's something going on there in the middle. One of our third-year teachers, she's actually going through the Emerging Leaders program also, and this is something I hear often, especially from those teachers who want to impact more and more kids, right? I love my job, I've made significant gains, but I want to change the larger unjust systems that are creating low-performing schools in our community. 16-year veteran teacher in Bridgeport told me recently that going through the Emerging Leaders program was the best professional development she had ever received in her time in the classroom, right? And this is someone who actually is certified to be a principal. So I thought that was telling. So here are the questions we're very focused on at Public Square, right? When you think about schools as the unit of change, and we all know it's critical to have highly effective teachers in those schools, it's like, how do we develop those teachers in our schools so that they're making the biggest impact possible on student outcomes and on the students overall that we serve? And I say that because to me, it's not just about academics, right? Like at Public Square, we are serving kids in high poverty neighborhoods. And I think as we've started to do this work, we've realized, you know, supporting students in terms of the social and emotional needs they have is just as important as the academics, if not more so. And I think that's something we didn't talk about at Teach for America, actually, when I was a teacher. It was sort of left out of the discussion, and we're trying to broaden that definition of what does it mean to be successful as a teacher in a low-income community. And then the other question we think a lot about is, how do we keep the most effective teachers, back to that 1 to 5, above 14 years, in our neediest schools long term? You know, I hear often from teachers, I'm exhausted, right? I've been doing this work at a pace that just does not seem sustainable. And I think that's something we need to be thinking about if we want to keep people in the profession long term. And then lastly, when I look at some of the challenges we face in Connecticut, you know, and I think we heard that from that 16-year veteran teacher, unfortunately, I don't think the preparation that many of our school leaders have is preparing them for actually leading a school. You know, we want great teachers to stay in a classroom, but we also need some great teachers to become school leaders. right? So it's that tension of like, how do you keep the greatest people in the classroom, but at the same time develop the skills of those that are interested in leadership? So these are our big questions, and I have every confidence that these guys are going to help us answer some of these questions. Again, think about the questions that you may have. I'm now going to turn it over actually to Tony, who is with NATE, and he's going to tell you about the work they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. It's great to be in a room with so many inspired and excited and talented educators. Thank you for having me. My name is Tony Klemmer, and I'm the founder and president of the NATE program, the National Academy of Advanced Teacher Education. And the focus at NATE is really on teachers in their student-facing roles first, classroom mastery, and then in their roles as peer influencers. And so when we define teacher leadership, we think of it with a small L for leadership. In our design work 6 years ago, alongside superintendents and CAOs, and with interviews and focus groups with high-performing teachers, we heard deepening our instructional practices was first and foremost. Great teachers that we work with in our program don't think of themselves as master teachers, actually. They think of themselves as constantly improving the art and craft of teaching, kind of as a journey, a long road, never quite reaching mastery, but always striving to be sort of more masterful. So the foundational investment, oh, that's forward. That's me. There we go. The foundational investment should center on the opportunity for deep exploration of teaching and learning concepts. I remember the first Teach for America National Excellence at Teaching Award recipient who came to the NATE program, had 7 years experience in the classroom, was nationally board certified. Rob Leichner, I don't know if he's here today. Anyway, 3 days into NATE, he turns to us and he says, "Wow, I have so much more to learn to become masterful." So that represents a little more than half of our program content for teacher leaders. It's then that we begin to develop their skills and competencies, mindset, their stance as supporters first and leaders second of their peers within the profession. This second domain of supporting and leading really kind of begs the question, what does it mean to be a teacher leader in a profession largely comprised of individual contributors, which is what teachers are? And in fact, most teachers are and will, for the bulk of their careers, continue to serve as individual contributors with at least 1 foot in the classroom. And they're not professionals with gobs of formal responsibility or authority. A lot of responsibility, but not authority. So how do they best navigate those roles? It's really more about influence than it is about authority. And so the other half of our curriculum is this work. What we hear from them is, I was the best math teacher in my middle schools, so they made me the math department chair. I really didn't have a clue what it meant to work with other adults, to coach, to mentor, to lead small teams. And in fact, I really didn't have a perspective on anything beyond my classroom, let alone the implications of our overall organization. So that's the balance of the program. And in both these domains, we think that experienced, high-performing classroom teachers should be served the way other professionals are served in intellectually challenging professions. And so our program curriculum is based on the CASE method of peer-to-peer, high-transfer, inquiry-based learning. And we assemble a cohort, a very diverse cohort of charter, district, and faith-based school teachers from across the country. And they're with us in residence to break set, as the research calls it, much the way that the Pahara and Aspen Institutes run their leadership programs. So our theory of change is simple. It includes developing teacher leaders and their school leaders in sufficient numbers to impact the performance of schools through intense professional learning programs. And we think that we can achieve the promise of teacher leadership when we see more and more teachers staying longer and longer in their student-facing roles, and smart school organizations continue to craft career paths and job descriptions that give great teachers like yourselves reason to stay. So thank you.
I can do it. Is it? It's this one, right? Yeah. There I am. Hi, my name is Susan Scheffler, and I'm the executive director of KIPP DC. And there's a few times I get nervous when I'm public speaking, but it's always in front of teachers. And so I'm honored to actually be here. I saw in the frequently asked questions for the Teach for America site that the number one question, or one of the questions that was frequently asked, was why was I not asked to be on a panel? So I'm actually really excited I made the cut this year. I started teaching in 1992, Core Baltimore, woo, TFA. And then I moved to the District of Columbia and I taught in DC public schools, and loved every single year of it. And there wasn't a year that was wasted or I should have been doing something different. It was very clear to me that every year that I taught made me ready for what I was taking on next. And now I've been outside of the classroom for longer than I was in the classroom, but it was that foundation of those 9 years that's allowed me to navigate the rest of my career in a way that makes sense. Except for maybe this thing. Okay, there we go. So what's exciting is KIPP DC is the largest charter network here in Washington, D.C. We have over 5,000 students. We currently have 16 schools, and we have a 17th school, which is why it doesn't add up always, but it's 16 schools, and we just opened up a learning center this year. That's amazing, and it's designed to meet the needs of our level 4 special needs kids in the district. We have about 50 leaders, so some of those people are sitting in principal spots, but many of them are sitting in vice principal spots. And in the last decade and a half, we have trained and prepared over 100 leaders. Now, we did not start off huge. In 2001, which seems like just yesterday, we had myself as the principal, and to be honest, I did not make this slide. We actually did not have a vice principal, but we had someone who acted like a vice principal, and then we had a lot of teachers, and, well, 5, one on one hand, and I realized even in just that year, that we had so much talent in the classrooms. And then fast forward, 15 years later, it is amazing to me that if we can guide and nurture our teachers and give them the time they need, they will be outstanding leaders. And so you can see we went from teachers and principals to have this whole band of opportunity. Our Capital Teaching Residency program, we're training over 100 new teachers every year within the district in the KIPP DC network. And that allows us to have 461 teachers that feed into 55 grade level chairs, 33 vice principals, 17 principals. And then we even have an academic team that supports our principals. And there's a few things with our model that I want to kind of briefly go over. It is absolutely the responsibility of my principals to train my vice principals. They have 2 really important jobs: run the school and train your successor. And that is a belief that all of us have to have. Don't be in your job and be great at it and do it by yourself. Train the people next to you. Train them in those soft skills. And so that is a mindset that's important. 2, our principals must be instructional leaders. If you are not knocking it out of the park in the classroom, don't ask me, can I be an administrator yet? You can't. I need you to rock it out in the classroom. I need my principals to be instructional leaders. That's what I need them to be before they get into administration. So I can teach you all the other things you need to know, and there's a lot. But I need you to learn how to be a great teacher first. Master the art of instruction, not just in reading, but in math, not in little kids, but in big kids. Not just how to manage your classroom, but how do you help the whole school? Do that from the classroom. Take that opportunity and go and do and take your time to do that well. Talent is regional at KIPP DC. I love a diverse learning experience. You might be an early childhood an early childhood teacher. I may ask you to be a middle school vice principal. I may ask you to be the principal of an elementary school. I want that diversity. I want those different experiences. That makes you a great leader. I also, it's important that our vice principals are trained over time. This isn't a one-year MBA, two-year MBA program. Being a principal, being a leader is a lifelong journey. And so I'm going to develop you gradually. And then I want you to have ownership. If you're a vice principal in our school, you're owning things from the beginning and to the end. That means you're running a fifth grade teacher meeting, a parent meeting, the curriculum, the budget, the facility, all of those pieces. I need you to have that exposure, and I need it to be hands-on. So, in closing, these are three folks that work for KIPP DC. One's TFA, one came from Inter-City Teaching Corps, and one was a DC Teaching Fellow. They all took very different paths, but I will tell you what is absolutely essential is they're all outstanding KIPP DC leaders. And so there are many different ways to get there, and we're going to make sure that all of the things that you do in the time that you're with us are really preparing you to not struggle in your first year. I need you to deliver in your first year. So I want to make sure we've done everything we can to make you successful, so when you're sitting in that school leader position, you know what you're doing. Thank you.
Although that's Stephanie, that's not Carolyn.
Oh, sorry. Did I go the wrong way?
No, I don't think so. But wait, one moment, please. Look, that's me. Are you feeling more confident? I know who I am. Hi, I'm Carolyn Belcher. I am a Charter Corps member. I taught in 1990 in New Orleans, Louisiana. I think I look good for my age. It's my 25th anniversary, too. I am also the president of TNTP. We are a national not-for-profit that partners with school systems on their most pressing student achievement issues. And what's going to be a little unusual about my conversation about teacher leadership is I'm going to approach it from the systems perspective and share some of the results that we had from the Mirage, which is our most recent national policy paper. The headline here is, it's been 25 years, and I think sadly we still don't have a consistent system-level, at-scale model that works for urban kids. I would argue maybe for all kids, but certainly for urban kids where we can say every kid is getting an excellent education in the way that we aspire to. And frankly, we don't have a shared understanding about what effective teaching looks like in enough urban systems and systems in general across this country. The needs of teacher effectiveness and teacher quality change over time. We learn new things. We expect more of our students. The Common Core has higher levels of rigor that we're expecting, and we're all still falling a bit short. So our development systems and teacher preparation programs need to up their game to make sure that we're not preparing our students for now, but for a better future where there's more opportunities. So specific to the Mirage, though, this is why I think we're not there yet. So the Mirage was intended to be an effort for us to identify those teachers who've actually improved substantially so that we could backwards map what did they do that differentiated them? What works at scale? So we assembled a very large data set, included over 10,000 teachers and 500 school leaders and surveys, and we looked at places where they had multiple models of teacher evaluation so that we could look at student achievement data, student surveys, observations, trying to figure out those folks who outperformed the average in terms of teacher improvement over time. Now, our plan here was we were going to find something that works in order to inform the sector. And what we found is it just isn't that simple. That while there were across the board in every system we looked at, the CMO and each of the large urban districts, teachers who really did outperform the average and improve, and in a variety of contexts, there wasn't something that was the clear thing that led to improvement. And our findings actually said that we, somewhat like a mirage, we've oversimplified how close we are to figuring out the key to improving teacher effectiveness at scale. Systems are making a massive investment in teacher quality. On average, in the systems that we looked at, $18,000 per year is spent per teacher per year. That's sometimes higher than the per pupil allocation of that district. That includes things like release time and additional compensation. And what we saw is that despite this investment, most teachers do not improve substantially year to year. That even when teachers do improve, we can't link their growth to any particular development strategy. In short, it made us sort of step back quite a bit and say, like, what's the answer here to get to scale and to get to real impact if professional development alone isn't getting us there? Now, before I sort of say where we ended up in our findings, I do want to make sure that I say that we did see some things that popped, which I think are worth calling out. If you can read the slide from where you're sitting, very good. Your eyesight is quite impressive. But I think what I want to make sure that you realize is that what we did is we looked at, these are all looking at surveys of teachers who, again, outperformed the average in terms of teacher growth, trying to figure out which they valued, and in terms of their self-assessment of mindset, looking at all kinds of experiences of time from coaching, university coursework. There were a few things that did seem to have small correlations. One is the mindset of being open to feedback and continuous improvement. Another is the idea that the standard to which you're being evaluated, so your own self-assessment of your work in terms of a teacher evaluation tool and your rater's assessment of your work, if those were aligned, you were more likely to be outperforming the average. So the idea is that when the standard of effective teaching is clearly understood, people can work towards it together, but when not, then there's more misalignment. Related to that is making sure that there were actually evaluator quality. You believe the person who's giving you feedback and giving your evaluation knows what they're doing. So this speaks to me about the idea and the power of making sure that there is a shared understanding of what it looks like to be an effective teacher in your school or in your system, and that you're aligning everything from the curricular choices that you make to how you bring in new teachers in induction, to how you support experienced teachers to your teacher career ladder, to that vision of effective teaching. So even though our hypothesis was not proved, I think where we left was an optimistic approach, that there's a chance for us to really reinvent the system here and redefine what it means to help teachers improve. The key to do that is to make sure that we're actually focusing on growth in student achievement, that the idea is that an effective teacher is one who improves student outcomes, and that can be broadly defined from value-add student achievement data, but to more esoteric and important things like growing kids' values and how they feel as leaders themselves over time. Reevaluating professional development, like if a district is spending $18,000 per teacher and getting inconsistent results, could that dollars be better allocated to teacher career ladders or teacher compensation or other things that keep the most effective teachers in the classroom the longest? And last, we're thinking a lot about reinventing how we think about supporting teaching at scale. Our current model of school districts probably doesn't work, and we should be rethinking in radical models of school design different ways to prepare kids for the future. And that might mean thinking about roles in the teacher quite differently, where some are curricular experts, some are working with small groups of kids on relationships and doing more field experiences, and other folks are actually structuring the classroom activities outside of school. So eager to talk more about this as the day goes on, but thank you very much.
Good afternoon. You got a little preview of mine. So I'm Stephanie Morimoto. I'm the Chief External Relations Officer at a national nonprofit called New Leaders. And I actually think the order we went in is a good thing because we're seeing some things that are working that build off of what Carolyn just shared from the Mirage. So I'm excited to share some of those with you in my opening and as we continue the discussion. So New Leaders is a national nonprofit. Our mission is to ensure that we're preparing all kids for success in college, careers, and citizenship by developing outstanding education leaders at every level. So what I want to do is share a bit about what we offer and do at New Leaders, what our impact has been, and some of the things that we're learning specifically around teacher leadership. Oh. There we go. All right, so we've been around for over 15 years. We've trained over 2,500 school leaders in partnership with 15 districts and 100 charter schools nationwide, and they collectively impact nearly 500,000 kids in our highest needs schools. We started out in 2000 specifically training brand new principals, and we were excited to see some great results from that work. The reason I came to New Leaders after serving on Teach for America's staff for 6 years was seeing that core members could struggle sometimes, right, if they didn't have the right principles. And when I learned more about New Leaders and saw an organization that was actually holding itself accountable for the results of its graduates on student outcomes versus the number of new leaders it was churning out, that was really compelling to me. So we take that accountability really seriously. We've contracted with the RAND Corporation to do an independent evaluation of how our leaders are performing by their children. And what they found was something called a New Leaders effect. So if you're a kid going to a school run by a new leader, you're going to perform better academically in reading, math, and graduation rates because you have that new leader principle. But the big lesson we learned in our first decade was that we can't just rely on superhero principals, right? Great principals need great teams of teachers rowing alongside them to make that difference for kids and the culture every single day. And so now we actually offer a whole array of programs to serve education leaders at every level, from teacher leaders to assistant principals to even what we call principal supervisors. So those of you in the room who are responsible for developing teacher leaders at the system, we offer things for you as well. One of the things that we're really excited about is not only the impact of our graduates on student outcomes, but the fact that our new leaders stick around longer. So nationally, 5 in 10 principals, leave their post within 3 years. New leaders, 8 in 10 stay beyond that point. This is the big problem that we're really trying to solve. So the Council of Great City Schools did a study. They found that 86% of school systems had teacher leader roles, but only 30% of them provided specific supports to help those teacher leaders be successful. And that's what Carolyn was alluding to. And yet we've seen through our programming, through our work on the ground, through our partnerships with districts, that there is a better way. So one of the programs we offer is called the Emerging Leaders Program. That's the one that Diane referenced when she was talking about that 16-year veteran teacher in Bridgeport, and that being the best professional development that that individual had ever had. These are the 3 big things that we focus on to make sure that we're really providing differentiated support to help teacher leaders improve instruction and learning at the school site. Selecting candidates with a track record of success themselves who want to build a culture of high expectations, offering really targeted training to make sure that teacher leaders understand what great instruction looks like and can actually coach a teacher team to do that and show measurable results for that group of kids by the end of the school year. And then finally, providing expert coaching every step along the way so that everything you're learning and applying in your school site is actually working, and that you yourself as a teacher leader are getting meaningful feedback on how to improve your practice and therefore the practice of teachers. So in closing, I just want to say if you want to learn more, we actually published a white paper called Untapped. It's available on our website, newleaders.org/untapped. I encourage you to download that to learn more about what we've seen.
All right. Hi, everyone. Oh, nice greeting. Just go forward.
Yeah. All right. There.
Boom. That's me. Well, that's actually not me. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Jonas Chartok. That's my Twitter handle up there if you're looking for me after this. I am the CEO of Leading Educators, which is a national nonprofit focusing on one thing, which is specifically teacher leadership development. And we are, I would love to tell you more about what we're doing, but as a point of privilege here, I just want to say, these 5 people up here, I can say that Leading Educators has learned something from every single one of their organizations, and that is one of the coolest things about being, obviously, an alumnus of Teach for America in many ways, is just the fact that, we have exposure to what works. And so this is incredibly a great privilege to be able to be here to talk as part of the panel with these folks. So you'll hear some commonalities because we have learned from a number of things that these folks have done. So Leading Educators, we have you're going to hear probably through our Q&A that there are a lot of different ways that you can think about and talk about teacher leadership. Some think about it as advocacy and policy. We think about it specifically as how can you make and help support the people in the next classrooms to you better at what they do, help them become better at what they do. And so that happens through a number of things that I'll talk about here. Before I get to that, though, and this will probably resonate with a number of the teacher leaders in the room, most people actually go into teaching to teach. They don't go into the profession to become a principal. They don't go into the profession necessarily to do anything beyond teaching other than help kids grow and learn and do that as best they possibly can. Do many go on to do those things? Yes, and we think that that is awesome. But before they get to that, as so many of my colleagues have already said, you all need to have certain skills developed, and so that you can make a choice about what you want to do next, where you can really make the biggest impact. The reason I put this slide up is obviously has a lot to do with winning. I'm actually not a Bulls fan, but these guys did a lot of winning, and Michael Jordan never wanted to be Phil Jackson while he was there. He wanted to be Michael Jordan, and he wanted to win a lot. And he knew that being able to win a lot meant actually making the players around him better at what they were doing, which he was particularly good at. And so if you think about the role of the teacher leader, it is about winning. It is about student learning, which is that winning. And how do you actually make the players around you get better is what we seek. At the same time, we actually know there's a huge demand for this, not just from the people that raise their hands, but from the schools and districts with which we work at Leading Educators. We know that people leave the teaching profession, particularly highly effective teachers leave the teaching profession at twice the rate in schools that are made up of predominantly students from low-income families. So there is this alarming, obviously we all share the passion around the achievement gap, but there is this transition or a transitory effect that's happening that we absolutely need to pay attention to, and we think that through Leading Educators that the teacher leadership is a way to get at that. So a couple things that we want to show you about what we focus on. We run a 2-year fellowship in New Orleans, Kansas City, Washington, D.C., and Memphis that focuses on providing teachers with specific skills necessary to lead to better colleague development and ultimately student achievement. And so you can see up here on the screen we have 4 major pillars. We have developing self as a leader, coaching others, leading small teams, and driving initiatives. We know that teacher leaders don't necessarily do all 4 of these things, and so we have a way for folks who enter our program to actually specialize in either coaching others or leading teams. Pretty much everybody has to, at some point or another, drive an initiative with their team, so we work on that with everyone. We also do strategic consulting with school districts like DCPS. So how many people are in here from DCPS? A few. So we've developed a program with DCPS that is actually a DCPS program that they're further developing with us called the TLI program. Over a quarter of the schools in the district are now part of this, where they're sending teams of teacher leaders and an administrator together to form a cohort. We started off with 7 schools a couple years ago. Now it's in a quarter of the schools, as I said, and it's going to continue to grow to actually bring a common understanding of what leadership and management needs to look like for teachers, but then also helping the managers of these new managers become even better at their work of managing managers. Sorry to overuse the word manager. Okay. But a couple other things I wanted to show you quickly. We think that all of those skills are important. At the same time, we also know that this work is fundamentally about equity. And it is ultimately about not just raising student achievement for student achievement's sake, but because we know that we have a lot to make up for at this stage of our schooling infrastructure. And so we don't think you can do teacher leadership without focusing on reducing bias in teaching. We don't think you can do teacher leadership without learning to become a better manager, which means needing to be able to manage across difference, across race. And so we focus heavily on those skills as well through our curriculum. And then this summer, I want to put a quick pitch in. On your chair, you have a postcard that for our Leading Educators Institute, which has a very heavy amount of equity development as part of it this summer. So we'd encourage some of you to come out for that in New Orleans. We wanted to also just point out the fact that in New Orleans, where we got our start. Over a third of the teacher leaders now in the city have gone through the Leading Educators program. And the RAND Corporation, which is working on also a study with us, has shown that actually we're starting to see that holy grail of teacher leadership take place, which is not just that the teacher leader is growing in their practice and moving their students forward at statistically significant rates, but actually that the teachers that they are coaching or managing are doing that as well in that city. And we're learning a lot from that, which we can talk about during the Q&A. We're working with some of the biggest districts in the country. Would love to, and some of the smallest as well. And so we'd love to talk with you all about the work there. And as you can hear from everybody that's spoken, teacher leadership really is, it is a major wave that is now cresting and about to crash over the country, which is fantastic. And all of us obviously have a role in playing on that. I do think, however, that it is the most obvious and yet undervalued of all of the ideas around how to make our schools better. And so hopefully during our discussion here, we can bring about how we can change that fact. Thanks.
So that was your quick little TED Talks from our panelists. So I have a series of questions that I'm going to ask the panelists before we open it up to you all. So definitely keep notes. But it's sort of touching on what Caroline spoke to, Carolyn, in the Mirage, right? And in many ways, it seems like we're not doing this very well. But you talked about these places where things popped and what those programs were doing. As you think about your own organization and also thinking about Common Core, right? The fact that we really need to be redefining what is school success, right? If it's not just academics, it's also social and emotional needs for kids. Just 30 seconds, maybe we start at this end with Tony. So what is your organization really good at now? And what do you need to grow at and get better at?
What comes to mind, is this on? Yeah. What comes to mind, I would say, for our program is this emphasis on classroom mastery, the use of the case method pedagogy, and the diversity of our cohorts. I think those are strengths. I would say our areas for growth, or what we wrestle with, would be the density of impact in networks and engaging school leaders in our work.
Hello. So ours is kind of similar, but I would say KIPP DC is really good at identifying and attracting diverse, smart, powerful talent, and then really cultivating them from the classroom to be really strong instructional leaders, so that when they get to the opportunity to be a principal, they are able to support every teacher in that building, whether they have 2 years of experience or 10. I think an area that KIPP DC needs to continue to focus on is how do we do a better job at sort of codifying what we're doing, making it a little bit more systematic, and I think we have a capacity issue, and we talked a bit, how do you do this at scale? We're really great at training leaders for the District of Columbia. How do we take that to the next level with such a sort of unique, individualized approach?
I would say TNTP is very good at following the data. We tend to look first at what's working with teachers who are really outperforming the average, or schools that are outperforming the average, and trying to get that information and make some conclusions that could have implications for the rest of us, and that includes our own work. So we've evolved our Teaching Fellows program a ton over the last 15 plus years, in part because we've looked at what works and what doesn't, and adjusted dramatically how we train teachers based on what the data says. As we think about what we probably need to improve, I think for us, we know we always started with teacher effectiveness and got increasingly into leadership, into system level reform, into policy, into academics now, because the idea is to get to an effective teaching, everything matters. You can't attend to just one. So I think the challenge is actually getting the synergy of getting all of them to work together at scale is still something we haven't seen it work significantly enough beyond places like DC and New Orleans, and that really is our mission, and we want to attain our mission.
For new leaders, I think on the strength side, what our participants often tell me is we know leadership. We know how to grow concretely people's leadership skills at each stage of their career. Similar to what Susan and Tony said, we're also deeply committed to diversifying the leader pipeline. So 75% of our leaders are people of color, largely Black and Latino Hispanic, to reflect the kids that we serve. On the growth areas, I think two big things. One, because we do work with leaders at all levels, we're always trying to align teacher leaders, school leaders, system leaders to create the right conditions for success. And then with the higher standards like Common Core that Diane mentioned, finding teachers who know how to teach like that and then developing them to lead other teachers to do that is a continual area of focus.
So I think at Leading Educators, our biggest strength is that we're a learning organization. We are learning all the time about what great teacher leadership looks like in different regions, and every school is actually different. They have different needs, and we've learned a lot about how form in terms of the role needs to match the function. Like what are you actually trying to do with your teacher leadership? And so we've learned a lot about that, and I think we continue to learn from the fact that we have a diverse network of charters and district schools sending folks to us. I think the biggest area of growth for us is actually figuring out how to influence systems that really do not think about this as a place to allocate their resources. Not leading educators, but teacher leadership, right? This idea that we're putting all of our money, for the most part, when you look at professional development, and just looking at the Mirage, which we'll talk more about, I'm sure, into front-end teachers and then also principal development, and for the most part, not realizing that actually if you hit that middle spot, that early to mid-career spot, you're actually making the capacity exist for principals to have more longevity in their work and to be more effective, and for these first and second year teachers to be doing the same. We're not good right now at helping, even though I feel like I'm very compelling right now, I don't feel like I'm very compelling with that for some reason in terms of actually getting to the point where districts are fundamentally changing the way that they are funding these places.
You're not alone, Jonas.
So let's double down on the Mirage a bit. When I think about some of the professional development I got as a teacher, I try to not remember it, honestly, because I feel like this was in the mid-90s. I don't know if it's gotten any better, but it felt like something you had to do, right? You were usually told to do it. You didn't get to choose it. You knew what you needed, right? And usually I'd go get that resource from the teacher next door. So I guess I have this question, right? Like, what does it actually mean to help teachers improve?
Would you like me to give my opinion?
Carolyn
I
could
have
start,
one.
and then maybe Tony and Jonas.
Well, first of all, it depends on how are you measuring how teachers are improving? How do you know when it happens? And I think a lot of the problem with teacher professional development right now is we're not actually setting out to measure what we're aiming to do. So we want to see a change in practice. What does that look like? Can you measure it through an observation cycle? You want to see changes in student outcomes. How are you going to measure that, especially in the Common Core reality? Thinking about the end game is probably the first step, because then you can actually start to see what's working and what's not, and recognize that just developing teachers to be more effective is too large of a granular size, right? We have to think about, I want you to be better at actually asking specific questions using a guided reading novel to actually pull out the meaning and the vocabulary. Get down at that level to see if you actually see changes in practice. So measuring first, I think. The other thing I will say in terms of thinking about teacher practice and how we can do it better is also thinking about the teacher role more strategically and creatively. I think there's more we can do. Right now we expect people to be great lesson planners, great classroom managers, have the ability to relate to kids and be able to develop them as incredible leaders and adults, so you have the values and the systems. It's an awful lot to expect of any one individual who's not paid that much and works a really long day. So how do we make sure that we actually differentiate a little bit more to ensure that if you're really great at constructing lessons that deepen students' understanding, you're doing more of that and less classroom management? If you're someone who can relate to kids incredibly well and inspire them to want to come to school, you should be doing more of that. Let's differentiate the teacher role to play more to people's strengths.
I would say another way to think about it is to start with the question of which teachers are we talking about when we're talking about improvement, because the needs of experienced, high-performing teachers for their development is considerably different than their the new entrants to the profession or their struggling peers, for example. I think long-term where this needs to go is it needs to be solved by teachers, with teachers, for teachers. And I think the folks on this stage largely are here saying we need to develop the teacher leaders who then we put the responsibility on their shoulders, context-appropriate ways in their schools to exercise the goal of job-embedded professional development. But you need this tier of teachers who should be responsible for this work. If one thing that I took a lot of things away from Carolyn's Mirage report, but one was that the central office folks who are responsible for these tasks right now are not getting consistent results, would be putting it mildly. And so I think handing this back over to those within the profession, it would be mirroring the way other professions operate.
Anyone else? Jonas, anything on that?
I'm good.
Okay. Well, one more question. So you're a teacher leader in this room. How do you know you're making an impact as a teacher leader?
Yeah, so that's a lot of what we do. Glad to take this part. So we focus a lot on the fact that you have to create these, as Carolyn was saying, these inquiry cycles where you're actually learning from what you're doing over time and collecting data over time. And how do we know as an organization? First, I'll tackle that, which is to say there's a huge problem in this field, which is that we actually don't have, and the Mirage gets at this, enough in terms of data sets that actually show what the causal relationship between teacher leadership ultimately and student achievement. And so that's where we're trying like crazy to change that. We at the teacher specific level though, there need to be folks who know how to ultimately, not just set the goals and lead a team that way, but also actually identify what are the measures that you're going to take over time to figure it out. That's not something that we've actually developed in terms of those management and leadership skills at a team's level in a lot of folks. And so that's what we need to do in part to get to a point where we're also marrying the fact that they're adding in these deep content knowledge levels where we are not just focusing on the leadership and management straight, but then also adding in what are the instructional shifts that need to be taking place, and then being able to gauge over time how those two components are actually coming together to yield actual achievement. And so happy to get at more of the specifics on that as we go, but want to also share with the colleagues.
Stephanie?
Yeah, I'd love to weigh in here too. I mean, this is something that we've been obviously thinking very hard about over the last 5 years as we've trained about 1,600 teacher leaders across the country. So I think Jonas hit on a couple of really good points, and Carolyn as well. Like, what are you measuring at the end of the day? Ultimately, we want to see that kids are learning more, right? So for us, we look at two big things. One, are teacher leaders in our Emerging Leaders program able to actually demonstrate student learning growth by the end of the training year? And then two, are they also demonstrating measurable growth and proficiency in key leadership skills? So we visited over 100 low-income, high-performing schools across the country, and out of that codified a set of key leadership competencies that were critical to turning around a school and improving student outcomes. And we've then developed a progression of those leadership skills that you need to master if you're a teacher leader versus an assistant principal versus a principal supervisor. And so we want to see by the end of your year in Emerging Leaders, have you actually mastered those leadership competencies? And what we've seen so far, still learning a lot, but what we've seen so far is those that have been able to master those leadership competencies and also grow student learning are those who then end up doing really well on a continued basis to improve teacher practice and student performance across the school building.
Great. So just switching a little bit, this is the topic that's been discussed in many panels, but I mean, how does a teacher leader's work look different depending on the type of school that you teach in, right? Or does it look different? Like, what have you all seen, charter, district, whatever, wherever your programs exist in terms of the governance structure and that impact on a teacher leader? Maybe I'd love to hear from everyone on this.
So we have the good fortune, I suppose, of serving charters, district, and faith-based schools. So we're across governance structures and school design, from personalized learning to expeditionary learning and project-based learning and so forth. And I would say that if the focus of the teacher leaders is on their own craft, their own classroom work, and then their influence on their peers, sort of more on influence than leadership, and continuous improvement, they'll have an impact. And I think that schools that are willing to, school leaders who are willing to relinquish some control, some portions of their leadership to the teacher leaders, sharing in that leadership, teacher leaders will be able, regardless of governance structure, to have an impact on their peers and on the students that they serve and that their peers serve. I think critical mass becomes the issue within a school, and I'm sure others on this panel would say the same, that if you have a critical mass, the governance structure shouldn't get in the way.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it actually, that wouldn't be the biggest obstacle. You know, I think for folks that are in schools where they feel like they aren't being heard, or their voices aren't being heard, or they don't have the opportunities or the access to be the next whatever they're thinking they're ready to be. I mean, I really think it starts with leading from your classroom and like figuring out what's missing in my classroom, what's missing in my hallway, what's missing in my school, and how can I find the resources to make that change. And whether it's bringing your parents together to tackle a community issue, or whether it's a school soccer program or safety patrols or student council or whatever it is, finding the opportunities. And that seems really small and insignificant. No, that is exactly where it starts. That is exactly how you go from, when other leaders in the building or other teachers say what you're doing down the hall or what you're doing, hey, you reached out to the parents. That's great. I usually try to keep the parents out of my classroom. And figuring out how you can make things better with what's right in front of you. All of a sudden you'll realize you're making it better for not just your classroom, but your whole wing and your whole school, and then all of a sudden the community. That's why I love teachers who want to stay in the classroom forever, because that first year of teaching, everyone's teaching you. And that second year, you're almost good enough to run your own classroom. And that third year, you might be able to look up and say, hey, I can help someone else in the building. And your fourth year, you can be like, I might be able to help this whole school. And your fifth year, like, I can help the community. And all of a sudden, you've built up this arsenal of tools that you can actually go and do something with. So to me, I wouldn't worry about getting the job in the office. Don't race out of the classroom to get to the principal's office. That's not the end game. It's important. And we need all of you to be principals someday, but just maybe not after your first year. Because there's so much to learn, and don't skip this phase. This is like your 4 years of college. Like, just take your time and learn everything you can. That is what I would say when you know you're ready to be a leader. And when I walk down the hallway and I'm like, that one's a leader. That one's a leader. That one 5 years. That one's a leader. I can do that based on how much you've done for yourself to represent and present so that you're ready.
I think you listen to Susan if you want to do this at a systems level, actually. It's a joke, but it's true, because when you look at large urban districts, when they create teacher leadership roles, actually teacher effectiveness is not necessarily an entry in. So it should be. Like, they should be thinking about who is the best in the classroom. Let's make sure those are the folks that we're putting in leadership roles, in curricular leadership roles, in professional development roles, and mentoring new teacher roles, giving them additional funds to stay in the classroom. Because part of this is making sure that we have a model where effective teachers get rewarded and want to stay. Another report we did called The Irreplaceables found out that principals don't even tell the teachers who are the most talented that they are the most talented, and that we want them to stick around for another couple of years, and that the sky is the limit. That would matter a lot to a teacher. And so why not do it? So making sure that you actually do differentiate by performance and ensure that teacher leadership is related to effectiveness in the classroom, that matters.
I would agree with Susan's impassioned plea to master instruction. I mean, I think that's where it starts, right? You have to have high quality instruction in every classroom for every kid across the school building if we're really going to move the needle here. I think the other thing that's important, though, to making teacher leadership work is relationships. And that's a big part of our curriculum for teacher leaders. How do you build self-awareness as a personal leadership strand? And then how do you lead other adults? because one of the things we always talk about at New Leaders is it's a whole different ballgame to work with adults than it is to work with kids. And you've got to be able to build trust and relationships and deliver feedback and have difficult conversations with adults in a way that they actually hear you and want to change their instruction to ultimately get better results for kids. So I would say making those relationships and that adult leadership work is critical regardless of the governance structure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I like that Susan used the phrase leading from the classroom. We put out a report with in partnership with the Aspen Institute that you can get off of our website at leadingeducators.org that is called Leading from the Front of the Classroom. And it is focused on, in part, the fact that we actually do believe there are conditions that schools and districts can set up that can help that school or district get greater traction and effectiveness with their teacher leadership development. So I don't want to get lost in the mix here that governance and structure actually do have a lot to do in our mind with ultimately the ultimate power and potential of teacher leadership within a school. That said, we also agree with, I think, a lot of what I've heard here, which is that there are distinct skills that you can master as a teacher leader regardless of your structure. Those things like managing up to your principal or managing laterally, or developing, as we heard, developing relationships across the school, across your team, and ultimately influencing key decision makers. Those are all skills that will ultimately have an impact to some extent, but then you also need to have some of those structures in place, which is why we're happy to see more districts around the country starting to focus on some of those.
Great. So I have 2 more questions, but if you have questions, there are mics here, so we'll be done in a few minutes. Stephanie, a few of you spoke to diversity. And, as someone who worked in schools that were sometimes diverse, sometimes not diverse, I often saw people of color not being tapped for leadership. And and I've seen this actually in school leadership recruitment too. There's an overabundance of language like, well, that person's maybe not ready. So I'm really curious, Stephanie, to hear about what you all are doing at New Leaders especially, to make sure that we're tapping the diverse leadership of teachers of color.
Great. So earlier I talked about the fact that 75% of our leaders are people of color, largely Black and Latino Hispanic. And so it's something that we're deeply convicted about given the students we serve, 90% of whom are kids of color growing up in poverty. And we've seen a few things work. I was actually just talking to the acting superintendent of Denver Public Schools about this earlier today, right? She mentioned a similar thing, that their system leaders often rely on their personal networks to figure out who they should tap for promotions. And one of our district partners said the same thing. What they've shared with me about what works with our model is that 1, we have an objective selection process, right? We have people do case studies and exercises so we can see the quality of their work first. 2, because during our program, people are demonstrating that they can lead a team of teachers to improve student outcomes, that they've grown specific leadership skills, now districts or charters have data, right, on what people can actually do, and they can have tougher discussions with each other around who should we be tapping for leadership versus, I think this person's ready versus that person's ready. So I think that's really important. For us personally at New Leaders, I think we've also been very committed to ensuring that our leadership and our staff reflects the schools and the students that we're serving. So when you're being recruited by a person of color or trained or coached by somebody who understands what your community cares about or what you need to do, that makes a big difference as well in wanting to join and do the work.
Anything you want to add, Susan? Because Susan's is very good at this at KIPP-DC.
I think for me, it just goes back to making sure, I think what's great is every time we train up leaders that are diverse, we have more diverse staff. Diverse leaders attract diverse staff, and it's a nice ripple effect, and it then all of a sudden looks a lot different than when you don't. If you've got to prioritize it, and it's. I know I put a lot on the classroom teacher to do all of these things, but it's also my responsibility and my KIPP principals and the other folks in the building here to help everyone figure out where their leader voice is coming from. And I think that that's really important, and making sure you're supporting everybody and figuring out, hey, what do I need to do? What are my next steps? What are the 5 things I need to do? So when you walk through the building, you're like, she's got it, he's got it. And I think, prioritizing it and supporting it and developing it is key.
Great. Thank you, guys. So we have a lot of questions, and I'm going to open this up now. And by questions, I mean ending with a question mark. No statements or monologues. So let's start on this side, and we'll just rotate. And if you have it to direct to a specific panelist, feel free to do that. So the gentleman over on my right.
Hello.
So I am a second grade teacher in Southeast DC, and I wanted to speak on autonomy and on teacher autonomy and what role do you think teacher autonomy plays in developing teacher leadership?
Carolyn?
So I might say something radical, which is like, I think the autonomy should be within a framework. So I think a principal and a school district leader needs to be very clear what effective teaching looks like in the first grade or second grade, very, very clear about that. And the curriculum actually should be defined so that kids are learning rigorous materials that connect to the next year's curriculum and the previous year's curriculum, and that there's an intervention strategy that makes sense. And I feel like too often what we've said is like, you've got to be creative, and lots of teachers are putting their energy into designing their own lessons out of the gate. And I actually think you got to be creative in figuring out what's going to help Johnny learn how to read this, because that's really hard to do. So put your energy and your creativity there and get them interested in the classroom. And so I would like to see more clarity so we all know what it looks like. What's that shining star of effective teaching? And I think that's where we should be putting our energy, through rubrics, through curricula, through model teachers and teacher leaders that you can point to in the building that define what effective teaching looks like. So you're shooting for that. And then autonomy comes later, for me, year 5 beyond, when you start to see where can you push the learning edge of the school to make it better.
Thank you. Young lady on this side, yes.
Hi, I'm a fourth-year teacher teaching currently incarcerated youth in New York City, and I have 2 questions. One is short for Stephanie. I'm curious to know, what are the key leadership competencies that you alluded to when you were talking earlier about the study that you guys do? And then this is for the rest of the panel, including Stephanie, of course. My second question is, so I've learned today that you guys work on training teachers and teaching them, the skills that they need to run schools eventually. One of my question has to do with what sort of work is being done to bridge the gap that usually happens between the administration and these teacher leaders that you're developing in public schools as a public school teacher.
Great. Okay, so I'll give the quick answer first. So high quality instruction is at the centerpiece, therefore instructional leadership is the core competency we look at. And then we also look at other leadership competencies that support the delivery of high quality instruction. So adult leadership, how do you lead teams of adults and get them to change behavior? Cultural leadership, how do you lead from a culturally competent place, especially given the kids and schools that we're serving? Personal leadership, self-awareness about your own strengths and growth areas and how that impacts your leadership of the school or the team. And operational leadership, so everything from budgeting to scheduling to make the school work well.
I'll just add quickly, we work again a lot together, which is great, and we learn a lot from each other. We have a similar set of competencies. I think that both actually share this commitment to equity as well, and so you can actually find that in the observable things while talking to or observing teachers, right, in their practice. And so that to us is a staple as well, and definitely you guys have it on your website. We have ours on ours. Definitely pull up those competency frameworks, and you can download them today.
This question you asked, the second piece about bridging the gap between the principal and the teacher leader, can you maybe clarify what that gap is?
Sure. I just feel that in a lot of public schools that I've worked at or have friends who have worked at, that there seems to be a misunderstanding between administration that focuses on. Usually there's like a power struggle involved between the administration and the teacher leader, and I would like to know what's being done to address this gap. Jonas seems to know what I'm talking about because he's nodding.
Yeah.
I mean, Yeah, I mean, in part, I mean, we run into this certainly a lot, and frankly, it's, as I said, it's really hard to get traction with this work in schools where there is a sort of sage on the stage, very sort of command and control, this is how the school is going to be run, and I'm going to micromanage everybody in it kind of approach. The good news is we know that is not, well, it's not good that it's not sustainable, but it's not sustainable, number one. It doesn't work, ultimately. Diverse groups make better decisions, and that means it can't just come from one person. And so we see that, there are definitely structures that are starting to show that when you do allow for greater autonomy, and this goes to the question over there, that yeah, you can innovate in a way, and the whole idea of managing up is that it makes, again, the principal better at their job, right? And so they don't have information that they need to be really good at doing their job. And so create that value proposition and actually influence your principal.
Yeah. I would just add, so I was talking to one of our new leader trained principals, David O'Hara. He runs a small high school in Brooklyn, New York, the other day, and he was saying when he was a brand new principal, it was really hard for him to share leadership with teachers, right? He was growing himself as a leader. He didn't quite get that shared leadership would help him do better in the school or how to do it. So he's now a veteran principal. I mean, he's been doing this for a number of years, and he's realized the value of sharing that leadership. So one thing we've done differently in our curriculum at New Leaders is actually training new principals on the importance of sharing leadership and then concretely how to do that. I think Jonas makes a really good point too, that as teacher leaders, it's about demonstrating how you can help the principal achieve the goals the school needs to achieve, right? Our principals are under intense pressure from their own supervisors to hit a bunch of mandates. And one thing we saw in our Emerging Leaders program is when we coached our teacher leaders to set goals that supported the school goals, the number of principals who said they valued emerging leaders and the teacher leaders in the program skyrocketed.
Great, thank you. Let's go to that side and take another question.
Hi, I'm a third-year teacher at my placement school in Baltimore, and so I am just recently out of my core commitment. But I'm already starting to feel more and more that I'm the one that's solely responsible for my own development. And as someone who really wants to stay in the classroom, but knows that I won't if I don't feel like I'm continuously growing, I'm curious what your advice would be to teachers in terms of how we can ensure that we're continuing to grow and also to spark that desire in our colleagues around us.
Well, one of the obvious answers is join one of our programs, I suppose.
I kind of had a feeling you would say
A lot
that.
of choices.
It's interesting. There's a lot of research that suggests that considerably more in the profession of teaching than other professions, that the power of the peer effects, that teachers are 4 times as likely to receive learning, advice, counsel from their peers than they are their school leaders, and 2 times as likely than they will go to outside experts. So your peers is probably your best resource day in and day out of building a virtual community of learning. And as Jonas and Stephanie and others have said, there's tons of resources that you could learn around until we see you at NATE or Leading Educators or something. Thank you.
Great.
Can I add,
Yes.
I feel too, it's important to find a system and a school that is going to push you to be your best, and that you can always go back once you're your best and help others there, but sometimes you do need to find a system that is going to, whether it's a teacher leader gap, 98% of my principals we're all KIPP DC teachers at some point, and so that gap is smaller, and we are really we thrive off of feedback from each other constantly, and I think sometimes you have to find that energy and help that expand as well, and it also pushes other systems and districts to say, hey, we need to train our teachers differently, we need to treat them differently. You start to see that change.
Great, thank you. On this side.
Hi, my name is Emily, and I'm actually not a TFA Corps member, but an Indianapolis Teaching Fellow from 2011.
Nice.
Thanks for having me here, TFA.
Very welcome here.
And this is actually a great segue from her question, because I'm actually an instructional coach now for being in the classroom for 4 years. And so I'm kind of in that sweet spot of not quite administration, but not a classroom teacher. And I love all of your programs, and I wish that I could go to all of your programs. Feel free to give me a scholarship or something.
Smart.
But what do you recommend at a building level? So I work in Indianapolis Public Schools at one building. How do you recommend at a building level cultivating this teacher leadership, whether it is top down and creating the programs or relationally working with teachers one-on-one? How do you recommend replicating some of the results you've had at a building level?
Well, I'm sure we can maybe all tag team to get at the answer here. I think obviously we're in the game because that hasn't happened to the degree independent of programs and cohorts that are being created at the systemic level. So that's what, anyway, that's why in part we're trying to exist and help. I will say though that the work itself is about engaging in the process. And so what's actually happening, your role as an instructional coach is one to bring your people together. Are you bringing them together as a team with each having individual areas of inquiry that they're trying to bring back and learn from and share with one another? That's at the heart of the work, because then you're actually sharing in a common mission together, and it doesn't need necessarily to come from an outside cohort in order to be able to do that. That said, there are distinct skills that are necessary to develop, and I think that a lot of us are actually working on getting to the point where there are already resources online. Teach to Lead is another place to look. There's a federal program out of the Department of Ed that some of you might be familiar with called Teach to Lead. They're putting a lot of resources online with again, tangible skill development. They're also doing summits around the country that are helpful places for people to convene when they don't have a larger network.
You reminded me, I think the Leadership Project in the Pahara Institute program I was in, I think we built a website. I should know this. Like teachers leading, if you give me your card, I'll find but it's like what Jonas is talking about. It's an entire website of resources for teachers thinking about leading professional learning for their peers. So another place to look for protocols and things like just what Jonas was saying.
Great, thank you very much. Young lady on that side.
Hi, my name's Alexa Katau, and I'm a passionate educator, and I want to stay in the classroom. And I love, as a long-term goal, to become a teacher leader, because it also would allow me to, while maintaining my role in the classroom on the ground, think about bigger issues and take on these bigger ideas we all love talking about. But I'm already facing the reality of burnout and just exhaustion. And so my question is, how can I aim towards this goal of adding even more to my plate when I already feel burnt out by the amount I already have on my plate?
Very good question.
I think Kip's been known to do that. That said, I've been doing this for 16 years. I have 3 kids, and one of them's here. And I think it's a lot. I think Kip came out of the gate working super hard, long, let's do this, hey, more hours, more time. And then at some point, we all got older, and you've got to do this smarter. And so I think it's figuring out how, and I know that's not a great answer, and you're like, great, thanks. Could have figured that one out myself. But the reality is we're doing a lot of things inefficient. I think Carolyn was speaking to are you writing your own curriculum when there's a perfectly, someone who wrote those books, some of them are good. And I think it's figuring out what is it you're trying to get better at, and what can you add to your plate that energizes you, that motivates you, and inspires you, and what can you say, you know what, I am going to use the handout, or I am going to use what I did last year, because it actually was pretty good. And so working smarter, training smarter, might allow for some of that fatigue. And the reality is, what's interesting is I'll talk to my kids' teachers, and they have a shorter day than what Kip has, and they're exhausted. So I'll tell you, the last hour isn't actually what's exhausting everybody. It's actually the entire profession. And I think that is part of the problem. But working smarter, not always harder.
Yeah.
Can get there.
So 2 quick things. One is, first of all, for administrators and people who are setting up the systems with which to get traction in this work, obviously release time matters. Obviously the structures to allow for coaching time matters, right? So, that's certainly one thing that I'm hoping, you can also develop your ability to sort of advocate for that too. However, I want to extend the basketball analogy a little bit further, right? So work smarter, not harder is definitely right. And a basketball team does not want 5 centers. They want 5 diverse, in terms of skill set, people on the team. And centers are generally, not always, but pretty tall. And so if you're coming already with that height, that is a great resource to take advantage of. And it doesn't mean adding necessarily to everything that you're doing, but actually exercising that and wielding that skill or that resource in a way that is actually highly effective for your colleagues to grow from.
Great, thank you. So we have time for 2 more questions, but if you have questions, stay for the end of the panel if we don't get to you. So we'll go to this gentleman and then the young lady on that side. But if we don't get to you, please stay, because the panelists up here would love to answer your questions.
Hey Susan, hey Jonas, how are you guys? Hello everyone else on the panel. My name is Paul Jackson. I'm the former Chief Development Officer of the Howard University Middle School of Mathematics and Science, and I'm presently the Managing Director of the United Way National Capital Area. Not to preach, but we do fund education programs, health-based initiatives, and financial stability programs throughout the region. And my question is primarily tailored around taking advantage of industry talent. My wife left a career as an architectural engineer and has now joined the Friendship Public Charter School Network and is providing high-quality STEM education, is really leaning on her previous work experience to do so. My question for you all is, how are you all leveraging the talent in the professional communities and inspiring them to come back toward this call to service and really give back toward education? First question, I'm sure you guys will all chime in on this. And my second question is, the great work that you all do, how do you fund this amazing work? And I know Susan has a great answer. I know David Wick very well. But I'd love to hear more about that and those 2 questions specifically.
So how do we tap into people from other industries?
How do we tap
and then
into
how do you
industries,
actually
and how do you
fund
fund the
this?
programs?
So Carolyn, maybe you can speak to
Tell
this,
us.
given the Mirage too, and how we're currently spending our funds within districts.
Well, we're putting $18,000 on average into professional development, so there's a big investment in teachers, and that's public dollars and release time and other things that's not probably getting the bang for the buck. So there's a question about better leveraging that for teacher compensation, differentiating rules, which would allow folks who have certain skill sets to earn more over time, which I think is a very powerful strategy that other fields use. I think the question of sustainability and funding actually is under-examined in our sector, frankly, because I worry sometimes that we're improving schools on the back of the philanthropic community without coming up with solutions that are actually going to sustain us and ensure that the schools are able to operate on their own in the future. Now, we are funded. TNTP is a national not-for-profit that has we have a split revenue model, so we're fee-for-service. Clients pay us. Now, we also do receive about $10 million in national fundraised dollars that funds our R&D efforts. And the client paying us thing, that's a hard conversation. We're working in a place like Detroit, which has no money at all right now. And to advocate across the table that they should be paying us for some of the work that we're doing is a challenging argument. But the reality is, unless people put skin in the game, it doesn't have the same value. You value what you pay for. And so part of our work, I think, is to make sure that things like teacher leadership roles are worth investing in. And that you have to make some choices about doing one thing over another that's going to actually get to outcomes, which brings me back to my measurement message. I will also say that your wife or anyone who's talented in other industries should consider joining 2 programs, either Teach for America, or there's also the Teaching Fellows
Might have
program.
heard of
So
it.
feel free.
All right, one last question, and then we're going to wrap up. Yes.
I'm Dana. I'm a teacher in Baltimore City and an advocate for the mental health for teachers. I'm wondering, in terms of teacher development, do you feel that we have adequately addressed teacher mental health and wellness? Is there data showing, thanks for the snaps, is there any data linking teacher wellness to student performance and teacher retention? And if we aren't, what do we do?
It's a great question. Anyone want to take that?
It's a great question that I feel inadequate. Like, I don't think we have data, and it's certainly at TNTP on this, a lot about mindsets and how a teacher's own resiliency and ability to kind of make it through challenging times matters. But I think your point is more about to what extent is the system helping the teacher be resilient through those challenging times, right? And I think my suspicion is there's a lot more we can do.
Yeah, also not in a position to cite a study, but what we do know from the studies that have been done around why people leave this profession and other professions is that they either feel, in part, because they feel isolated, like they're alone in trying to figure out how to do this work, and obviously a lot of what we've talked about here today gets at that. And then this idea that my manager doesn't know my work. They don't know me, they don't know what I'm trying to accomplish, they don't know my vision for my kids, they don't know how far I've come in this skill or that. And that's just comes down a lot to the structure of our schools. And I think that has a tremendous impact, I'm guessing, ultimately on a teacher's mental health over the course of time.
Great. So we're going to wrap up, and I actually have one final question, and it was touched on the panel a bit, but it's this question of scale, right? We have 3 million teachers across the country, right? And back to the work that we're doing in Connecticut. Anyone wants to come to Connecticut to be a teacher leader, come talk to me. But how do you do this, like, broadly? Like, when I look at the communities we're serving, we have like 500,000 kids in Connecticut. 100,000 of those kids are attending schools where they're not currently on track to graduate from college or to have competitive careers in the 21st century, right? Teacher leadership, we're convinced, is a part of like what you see as a best practice in our strongest schools. How do we scale this up?
This question reminded me, and early in our work, I was sitting with Doug Lemov, and he recommended that I pick up a book by Stephen Ambrose called Citizen Soldiers about World War II. And it argues essentially that the enlisted men and women and junior officers, not the generals, won the war. In 1939, the United States of America had 150,000 trained military personnel. That's it. 5 years later, in 1944, we had 8 million. So when our country sets its mind to do something, we can do anything at scale. And if we want 100,000, 200,000 teacher leaders in this country and we set our minds to it, we can do it. We modeled at NAET doing 20,000 teachers a year. And so funding would become an issue there, sustainable funding. But if there's if the professional will is there in this country, we can get to scale.
Anyone else want to add to this?
Why not? We're seeing some of the largest school districts in the country now. Right here in DC, the district is taking a comprehensive approach to putting this in place. And what we're finding is that if one teacher leader is really actually then imparting these leadership development skills to their team of 5 teachers, it is absolutely going to grow across these districts. In Denver, which we heard about a little bit in some of the other sessions, they have taken a structural approach to teacher leadership and it is now everywhere in that district. They have a different way of compensating, they have a different way of role design across the district. And again, these models need to be amplified. So I think one is just to continue to promote through forums like these and just more publishing of what's working out there to actually bring light to what some of these districts are doing. And ultimately, we're going to find more of these studies that show the impact. I am 100% sure of that is going to happen. It's going to show that there is a causal effect between strong teacher leadership development and student achievement and teacher retention and success.
I think I'm going to make 2 points. One is this idea that too many of the proof points of what actually works at scale we're not replicating, which is concerning. Right. Like here in DC, some of the efforts that's gone on the impact system around the teacher evaluation and aligning to a clear standard, and actually now moving into up the game in terms of instructional rigor. They have a plan, they've improved things, and you don't see very many other districts taking it on, in part because of the political hot potato of it. So part of this is like get out there, be politically active, be engaged. The teacher voice is an incredible influencer to the community, and it matters. So I think that's huge. And then I would take the long game approach, which is recognizing at scale, we haven't done it yet. So the current model probably isn't going to work. So we should all be taking greater risks and trying new ideas. Thinking about differentiated roles, like charter schools look very similar to traditional schools in many, many places. Let's try really new models of school where we're doing blended learning, differentiating roles, ensuring that there's a high-performing teacher has a greater reach. So rather than touching 25 kids, they're touching 125. Let's think creatively about the system, because that's the only way we're going to see real reform at scale.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. I want to thank all our panelists. You guys are still amazing educators, because I feel like I just learned a ton. And I want to thank everybody in the room for coming, and especially the teachers that are in classrooms today. You guys rock. Thank you very much.
Let's thank Diane for her
Yes, thank
excellent
you.
moderation.
Thanks, Diane.